Ratings agency Fitch has downgraded Ghana's long-term foreign currency issuer default rating to B- with a negative outlook. The rating sends signals to the market that investors should be particularly wary of lending to the country and comes on the back of concerns by investors captured in a Bloomberg News report published this week. Let me share with you some of the critical highlights of that report, or I will bring that to you in a bit. All right, so there we have it on your screens, and it says the downgrade of Ghana's IDRs, a negative outlook, reflect the sovereign's loss of access to international capital markets in second half 2021 following a pandemic-related surge in government debt. This comes in the context of uncertainty about the government's ability to stabilize debt and against the backdrop of tightening global financing conditions. In our view, Ghana's ability to deliver on planned fiscal consolidation efforts could be hindered by the heavier reliance on domestic debt issuance with higher interest costs in the context of an already exceptionally high interest expenditure to revenue ratio. Ghana's effective loss of market access to international bond markets increases risks to its ability to meet medium-term financing needs. In our view, Ghana has sufficient liquidity and other available external financing options to cover near-term debt servicing without Eurobond issuance. However, there is a risk that non-resident investors in the local bond market could sell their holdings, particularly if confidence in the government's fiscal consolidation strategy further weakens, placing downward pressure on its reserve. Now, joining us for some analysis or to explain to us what exactly this means is Professor John Gachi. He is Dean of the UCC School of Business. Good evening to you, Professor Gachi. So we've seen this rating downgrade by Fitch. What are we to make of it?
The essence of rating is to indicate to the markets as to whether the country is able to pay in the medium to long term the indebtedness to investors. And as at this point, Fitch is saying that there is uncertainty as to whether the credit worthiness of Ghana is at that level that payment of indebtedness to creditors will be assured. So what it means is that there is a downgrade of our credit worthiness, and that has implication for our domestic economic management and participation in the international bond market.
Now, the report also goes on to say that it's unlikely that Ghana can return to the capital markets, the international capital market, to raise funding. Essentially, is it that we can't go at all, or if we go, we'll be punished for it, as in we'd have to pay more interest?
Well, as it is, we are around a junk bond status. What that means is that when you attempt to go to the capital market, the only reason why you have access to capital is because you are going to pay a very huge cost for that. And that is what it means. And already our interest cost is going up significantly, which undermine fiscal consolidation and even investment in key sectors of our economy. And that has actually been a signal to the international market. So we can't go to the international market, but we can only access capital at very huge cost, which is not in the interest of our country.
They also go on to say that even for the domestic market, where government is likely to end up borrowing, there are those foreign investors who are likely to let go of their bonds. What would the implication also be?
Well, I think the implication is that if those who are holding our bond from foreign countries decide to call off their bond earlier than maturity, that will put pressure on the economy to pay them. And especially we are going to be paying them in foreign currency. That will put pressure on our reserve. And there is one tricky thing about the reserve. When they are reporting the reserve, they are only reporting the gross international reserve. but that is not the reserve available to be utilized. There are parts of the reserve that by law we cannot use. For example, stabilization fund is part of the reserve. The heritage fund is part of the reserve. By law, you cannot use those parts of our reserve. So we should be thinking about what we call the net international reserve, and that is not enough to cater for this situation. So we are actually in a very precarious situation that we need to put heads together to deal with the mess we find ourselves in.
What will the implications also be for our ability to shore up the Ghana cedi from depreciating?
Of course, the moment you start depleting your international reserve, it puts pressure on the currency. It becomes weaker. And you know, there is a component of our debt that comes from depreciation of the cedi. And what it means that our debt portfolio will go up as a result of depreciation of the currency, and that will shoot up the debt to GDP ratio and make the outlook more precarious and unattractive.
What are the options available to government? Should we be looking at an IMF?
Well, going to IMF is a decision that the government ought to make, but all that this rating and all the analysis is telling us that we have gone wrong in debt accumulation. We should slow down on debt accumulation. We should prioritize our borrowing. Our borrowing should be productive as opposed to what it used to be in the past. And then we should also prioritize our expenditure. This is a time that we should.
I seem to be having some challenges with the connection to Professor John Gachi there, but he was highlighting what government needs to do to resolve the situation. He indicates that when it comes to going to the IMF, it's one of the, well, options available to government, but certainly that will also have implications. Looks like we're unable to bring back Professor John Gachi. So we will take a break here, but one of the other things in the report that I'd like to share with you says government debt reached estimated 83% of GDP end 2021. We forecast government debt to remain on upward path through 2025. Ghana will be unable to issue on international capital markets in 2022, and prospects for doing so in 2023 are uncertain.